now, here are your hosts, Janet Hickox and Roger Wetzel.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today on Empower You. I'm Janet Hickox, and my partner over here is Roger Wetzel. Hello, Roger.
Hello, Janet. How are you this morning?
You know, for a dark and dreary day, I'm doing pretty good. Did you guys survive the wind over there on Guimas?
Yeah, I was waiting for the power to go out, and it didn't, which I was really excited about.
Ours did for a moment, and then it came back on, but
yeah,
crazy day.
What happens when you live here?
Oh, yeah, you get used to it. Now, our guest today is Alex Bratty. She is the author of the book From Chaos to Clarity, which I'm going to hold up for everybody here right now. And Alex is a life coach, motivational speaker, and the author of From Chaos to Clarity. Her work helps clients transform their lives by empowering them with personal development techniques, resources, and processes so that they can take action to create and live the life they truly want. Alex, welcome to Empower You.
Thank you for having me, Janet and Roger. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you.
It's really great to have you, and I've been looking forward to this interview because I actually read the book.
Thank you. That's a big compliment. Thank you.
And I live in chaos.
He lives in chaos. I needed clarity. I have had a tough run over the last few months, and I always know when I'm having a tough run that my clients are also going to be coming to me and looking for answers. So I have a feeling this was quite timely. So give us a little bit of an idea about you. I just gave you this very short, brief intro. Tell us how you came to write this kind of a book and a little bit about your background, because you have a really interesting story to share.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I spent about 15 years in corporate research and made my way to the top of my field. I became a partner in a very prestigious firm in Washington, D.C. And it was one of those situations where from the outside, it looked like I had it all, right? I had the big job, I had the clients, I was traveling all over the country doing work for them. And who wouldn't be happy with that? Except that I wasn't. And over time, what happened is that what I was doing started to become unfulfilling for me. It just wasn't providing the meaning that I was looking for. And I was spending so much of my life doing this. I was away from my family. And I really got to the point where I said, gee, you're spending so much time doing this. Maybe it's time for a change if you're really this miserable. But of course, I had a lot of guilt around that too, because I felt like I should keep going with what I was doing. Hey, you're good at it, so keep going. Hey, you got this great position, why would you give that up? So I really did grapple with that for a long time. I mean, it took me, a year or two to make the decision that it really was time for change. But in doing that, and as I was working through that decision, I engaged a life coach and started on my own personal discovery journey. And in doing that, I really discovered that, gee, there are more options out there. There are more possibilities out there. I don't have to stay on this hamster wheel I've been on for the rest of my life. And so as I did that, and I started to become much more self-aware, much more conscious of the fact that I was creating my own reality. And that was a tough pill to swallow because, of course, why would I have created something I don't like? That's hard to wrap your head around at the beginning when you're really, grasping these initial concepts. But once I did, it actually is incredibly empowering because, gee, if I created something here and kind of did it by default without realizing it and I didn't like it, now that I'm more self-aware and I understand this whole idea that I can create the life I want, then I can start deliberately creating and I can go about creating that life that I did want. And so as I moved through all of that, it became apparent to me that I wanted to help others who were struggling like me, who were run down, burnt out, stressed with their work. And so that's when I started transitioning into coaching and, of course, writing the book and speaking about it too. So I'm essentially corporate professional, MBA and all that, turned certified coach, speaker, and now best-selling author.
Which is so awesome. But I gotta tell you, I guarantee you there was one huge fear, at least, in you being able to do this. And
multiple fears.
Because that's, what a lot of people listening to this today are going to say to themselves is, how do I do that? How did you get yourself from this high-paying job and muster enough courage to be able to leave that and go on to do something that was much more heart-centered and more along the lines of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, and there was a lot of fear along the way. Believe me, it's not like I just sort of, like I said, woke up one day and decided, yeah, I'm going to do this. It all made sense. It really did. It took time, and I think that that's the thing that, you know, we live in a society where more and more we have instant gratifications. We want everything literally yesterday, right? And we sort of hope that some kind of silver bullet solution is going to come along, or we're going to, like I said, wake up one day and just have like this amazing idea and inspiration to go do it. That's not the reality, folks. Sorry to sort of burst that bubble. It really did take me a long time to get there. You know, when I say really long time, it took me a year or two. Now, in the scheme of things, that's not very long. Of course, when you're moving through it, it can feel like a long time. And so what I tell people who are sort of looking at their situations, if they're feeling, you know, boy, I really want to change it, I want to do something different, is to start small, to really start getting very clear on what you do want. And that's what I did. So I started getting really clear, first of all, about what I didn't want, some of the things that really bothered me about my situation. And from there, it's easy to pivot into, okay, well, if you don't want that, then what do you want? And start getting really clear about that. And once I realized that I had all this new sort of knowledge and self-awareness, once I realized that there were other possibilities for me, then the idea of staying where I was, it just didn't work anymore. I knew at that point that no matter what my fears were, it was sort of on me to step into this. Because what was I going to do? Kind of like put it all back in the box? No, the genie was out of the bottle, right? So that really was, I think, the pivotal moment where it was like, okay, I really am going to make the change. But some people have to do it over a longer period of time, right? And so I always tell people, you know, start where you are with what you have, right? And just think about essentially, you know, what's one thing I can do today to move me in the direction towards my dream? And it may be really small. I mean, it may be like a 10-minute thing that you do that day, but it's doing that and doing it kind of consistently and persistently and keeping that goal or that dream that you have out front and center and saying every day, what's one thing I can do, you know? Or another thing that I always say to people is, what would you do if it didn't seem impossible?
Yes.
That's the other thing, right? Like sometimes we feel like, oh, it's just too far out of reach. I mean, yes, I want that, but it's so far away. How will I ever get there? It just seems, you know, it's not even possible to do it. Well, what if it wasn't impossible? What's the one thing you would do? And then go do that. Go do it today. And see how those steps, once you take them one after the other, they start to bring you much closer to where you want to be.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine you had to deal with a lot of self-talk in the process, too. I'm sure, as like anybody who starts out on a new trail, fears come up, or, you know, old patterns and beliefs and things like that. So why don't you start telling us from the book's perspective how you started working with that energy, and how did the book come up from that?
Yeah.
How is your book different?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that negative chatter, we all have it, right? And I actually have a whole chapter devoted to that in the book, in terms of how do you recognize that it is just negative chatter, that it's not real? Yeah. Because if we listen to those voices over time, they do seem real, right? So you have a great idea, and the minute that you have it, in comes that voice. You can't do that. Who do you think you are? You don't have enough knowledge, blah, 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 blah. And so,
yeah, I've heard those voices.
Yes, I mean, we all have it, right? And by the way, it never goes away. I mean, that's the key here. Just because you learn some of these tools and, you know, techniques to sort of be more self-aware and know that it's those voices, doesn't mean they go away. They're always there. And that's kind of the key, is recognizing what it is, that it's just my negative ego chatter, it's not real, and then how you put it off to the side and instead tune yourself into the positive voice that you have within you, because you do, we all do. Some people call it their higher self, their true self, their real self, their divine self. And how do you tune into that? Because that part of you, that has all the answers. All those questions you have rolling around in your head, like, what am I supposed to be doing? What's my calling? What's my purpose? Is this the right thing? your higher self, your divine self knows those answers. And so it's really about quieting that negative chatter and then tuning into the positive chatter. And I talk about all that in the book in terms of how you can do it, so that as people read the book, they are able to do that themselves. They know now how to do that. And that was very, I still have the negative chatter. I mean, just putting the book out into the world, of course it's negative. Is this book going to be any good? Who's going to read it? Of course, I still have all of that, but it's using those tools to quiet that and then listen to that positive voice and really tap into that quiet, strong, empowering self that we all have within us.
Instead of letting that negative chatter take you down and stop you from doing what you really wanted to do.
Exactly, because when you just let it, essentially that negative chatter, it comes in uninvited. When was the last time you invited it in? You didn't. It just shows up. And unless you stop it, it runs amok. And it does keep you stuck. It keeps you stuck in place and afraid to do all these wonderful things you want to do. The key with the positive is that does need an invitation. It's not going to come in uninvited, just like your negative chatter does. So it's about learning to tune into that and invite it in and listen to that. And it's a much quieter voice than that big, loud din of the negative chatter. So they're very different. And it is about how do you actively tune into that positive chatter so you're not letting the negative run the roost.
It's interesting because I'm working on a book right now, and a lot of what I'm writing about is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like we have this, and from my perspective is like, I have a master's in psychology, and, going through that whole thing, it's like, well, you have the positive aspect of the ego and the negative aspect of the ego. And where I'm coming from now is the ego is, the only purpose, as I see it, is it's there to destroy you. Because if you listen to that, if you just listen to that voice all of the time and have it in your head all of the time, you will just live your life wandering around at its whim. It's like you have this crazy person that's in your head, and it's like, how do you get from that to that, listening to that quiet voice? And so I'm going to ask you, how is your book different as far as like the self-help genre? How is your book different than most of the other books out there?
Yeah, that is such a great question. Thank you, Roger, because of course there are, thousands, millions of self-help books. Like, why do we need another self-help book, people? There's already plenty out there. So I think when I think about that, for me, it's one big difference in the sense that there's a lot of self-help books out there that have kind of one focus, one very deep kind of aspect of personal development. And that's great if you want to take a deep dive and really look into that, like you were just talking about, like just the ego and how to handle the ego, or, other aspects of the personal development world. But with my book, essentially, if you're not sure where to start, or you've never even sort of entered this personal development world, but you just kind of know that you need something because you are stuck, that's where my book is different, because it really is a soup to nuts guide. It's kind of a step-by-step process of how do you go all the way from being stuck to being unstuck, and giving you essentially a roadmap to do just that, with little exercises and tools and techniques along the way, so that you really can move yourself incrementally from that really stuck place and start to feel that empowerment and that freedom again, and that things are moving again in your life.
Where do people start when they feel stuck? Because to me, that's the key. If you know where to start, then you can start moving some energy and move away from that. Tell us, from the book's perspective, where does someone start that knows they're stuck or feels like they're stuck?
Absolutely. So, obviously the first thing is that initial recognition. So if you recognize what's going on, you've already started, actually. But then the next step really is sort of wrapping your head around that concept that I was talking about at the beginning of the show, which is you have the power to create your life. You are creating your life. So even if you don't like where it is right now, guess what? You created it. You created it through the choices that you've made, the decisions that you've made. And I know sometimes we feel like we don't have a choice, or we don't have an actual decision to make. We just kind of are going down this path. But that's really not true. You really do always have a choice. So it's becoming aware of that. And then I essentially tell people, you know, 3 things, which is hit the pause button, because if we're going in a certain direction, we can't just immediately reverse it and go the other way. You've got to pause. You've got to slow down first before you can reverse direction, right? So hit the pause button and assess where you're at. Look at your situation for what it is. And this is the key, accept it. Even if you don't like it, accept it, because the more you hate on it, the more you don't like it, the more you're actually locking it into place. You know, as you have that resistance, you're essentially creating more of the same. So just accept it for what it is, but know that you can change it. And then the second thing is start getting very clear on what you actually want. And for some people, that's a very difficult question. They actually can't answer it. Even though it's very simple, it's difficult to answer. If that's the case, start with what you don't want. Start making a big list, all the things that bother you, all the things that you don't like in your life. And from there, pivot off of those. Okay, if I don't want this, what do I want instead? And start making that list of what you do want. And that third thing is start paying attention to where you're focusing your thoughts and your energy, because what we focus on expands in our life. And if we're just focused on that list of what we don't want, we're going to create more of it. So start focusing on what you do want. Start getting really in tune with that, because as you put your energy there, as you put your thoughts there, those things will start to show up. And you can start to create that plan for, how do I actually get there? How do I actually create this in my life and move to this place that I want to be?
That's great.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break right now. And when we come back, I want to talk about choices that we make and a famous movie that came out a few years ago. So we'll be right back.